daily puzzle, we get to enjoy an awesome puzzle composed by Henry Rink. Now in this position with white to move, we have limited material. Black has a dangerous advanced pass pawn that's also supported by a rook. Thankfully, we do have one pattern in our favor. The rook and the king are diagonally aligned on the dark squares. So our first move is pretty straightforward here. We're going to skewer the king to its own rook. A skewer is basically a reverse pin. We attack a more valuable piece in front, and behind it is a less valuable piece. Now black only has two ways to avoid this bishop staring contest while still protecting the rook. Let's first take a look at the road not taken. Now one nice thing about the puzzle is we know that worst case scenario, at any moment we can capture the rook. So if there's nothing else, we at least have a draw. We're not going to win the game with the bishop alone, but black is not going to be able to promote this pawn. But here we want to play for the full point, and these bishops are incredibly deadly slicing through the diagonals. Here we can attack the king. And notice the king is no longer able to defend the rook. So if the king moves out of the way, we happily collect the rook. And if the rook steps into a pin, well, now we move our king to h2. And all of a sudden, black is in zugzwang. Any move will make black's position worse. The rook is pinned. It can't move. The pawn is blocked. So black only can move the king. But where? The king is unable to move to a dark square that defends the rook. So after the king reluctantly breaks its bond with the rook, well, now we'll happily collect the rook, and now we'll be ready to test our two bishop versus king checkmating technique. Okay, so moving the king to h5 actually really simplifies our task. So the puzzle comes up with the more stubborn attempt, moving the king forward. Now, of course, at any moment we can capture the rook, icing the draw, but we're going for the whole thing here. We need to keep attacking the king, but in which way? Now it's tempting to keep the bishops coupled together here, slicing through the diagonals in unison. But as we'll see, unlike bishop e2, black has two reasonable choices. King h5 is fine, and black can also just move to a dark square. In this case, our dark squared bishop can't both attack the rook and harass the king. So without a clear follow-up in mind, black's pieces are ready to come to life. So this is why it's so important to play bishop e2, confronting the king and eliminating the king h5 escape option. This really simplifies our calculation task as black only has one way to hold on to the rook, moving the king to g3. Now, of course, it would be nice for our bishop to travel to e1, but that's not happening anytime soon. We can dream about moving to that diagonal, but this isn't forcing enough, so black could then move the pawn or just get the rook out of the way. Now with h2 in the air, this is a perfect opportunity to confront the king yet again. Our bishops are slicing through the diagonals, and the king actually doesn't even have a legal move. Once again, we're continuing to restrict black's options as much as we can. Here, black only has one legal move, stepping the rook into the crosshairs. And now we reach one of the most complicated moments in the puzzle. We're on the brink of delivering zugzwang. But how? It feels like we could make just any move. Move a bishop somewhere, maybe move this bishop, maybe even the king. How exactly do we decide here? Well, notice if I move my king to the side, this allows black to take advantage of the space left behind. Sure, the rook is hanging, but now our bishop is under fire. So here black is escaping. Now a similar waiting move that runs into a problem is moving the bishop to h5. In this case, not only is h2 possible, the king can also move out of harm's way, unpinning the rook, and attacking our bishop at the same time. So what if we use our dark squared bishop as a waiting move? The problem here is that black can force our king into the corner, and once again take advantage of the space the king left behind, once again escaping with a draw. Okay, so we're trying to find a good waiting move. We know h2 is in the air, and one of our biggest problems is giving up the f2 square, especially if it attacks our bishop in the process. Now imagine if we moved our bishop to d1. Sure, there's no stopping h2, but now after crouching in the corner, after giving up the f2 square for the king, well, in this scenario our bishop would not be hanging, so in this case we would just take the rook. So by process of elimination, we can move the bishop to d1. So now black has two options: give up the rook and let us flex our two bishop checkmating skills, or push forward with the pawn, forcing our king into the corner. And man, this rook would love to deliver mate, but it's pinned to its own king. So thanks to this nice waiting move, the king is unable to counterattack. So wherever it moves, we're going to take that rook. We conclude today's beautiful study after king h3. The rook is unpinned and is one move away from delivering mate, but that's not going to happen. We capture the rook, we're ready to collect the final pawn, and then we can flex our two bishop versus king checkmating skills. Thanks for joining me for today's daily puzzle. If you're not exactly sure how to win this endgame, be sure to check out our drills